The unbelievable nightmares from a haunting Mexican TV series that will keep you awake. I never should have opened that door. The thought crept through my mind like a shadow, cold and heavy. It was just a regular Tuesday. The kind of day that lulls you into false security. I was at home, scrolling through my phone, unwinding after work. Then, I stumbled across an old Mexican TV series, rumored to bring nightmares to anyone who dared to watch. Curiosity prickled at my skin, bubbling into excitement. But I should have known better. The air grew thick as I pressed play. The opening sequence twisted and turned in vibrant colors, shadows flitting across the screen. Whispering voices slithered from the speakers, echoing in the silent room. My skin prickled. I brushed it off, thinking I was being silly. But then it started, the chilling tales of hauntings, of places forgotten by time, each episode more unsettling than the last. My heart raced with every suspenseful moment. The show's main character, a ghost hunter, dove into abandoned places, each time drawing closer to something sinister. I felt as if I were there beside him, gripping the arm of my chair, every creak of the floorboard sending shivers down my spine. The darkness in my living room felt alive. I could almost smell the damp, musty air of the haunted locations on screen. A chill ran down my spine, and my heart pounded unnaturally fast. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. I froze, breath catching in my throat. My pulse quickened. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself, but deep down, I felt dread gnawing at my chest. I slowly stood, inching toward the sound. Shadows danced on the walls, as if warning me to turn back. The chilling air wrapped around me. I was standing on the edge of a precipice. I reached the kitchen. Nothing stirred. Just a few dishes clattered haphazardly in the sink. Yet, the sense of unease hung in the air. I turned back toward the living room, and there it was, a fleeting shadow skimming past the doorway. I blinked, but it was gone. My breath quickened. Panicked now, I tiptoed back, scanning the dimly lit space. The television still flickered, casting an eerie glow. Voices thrummed on a loop, a twisted choir that sang of horrors waiting for me. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching from the dark corners. The very walls seemed to breathe, alive with the stories just told. Then, I heard Itzamething whispering my name softly, beckoning me. A low, haunting sound that sent chills through my body. I felt a lump in my throat, my hands trembling. "Stop it!" I shouted into the emptiness. My voice felt weak, swallowed by the sheer terror closing in on me. I turned to flee, but just as I did, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. The sound reverberated through my bones. Panic swelled within me. My heart was thrumming loudly, echoing that chilling whisper. I was not alone. And then, from the corner of my eye, a figure emerged. It stood tall and shrouded in darkness, with a grin that sent ice through my veins. I stifled a scream, frozen in place. What was happening? Who was it? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure loomed larger as shadows wrapped around me like tendrils, trapping me in place. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, pinpricks of malevolence that reflected an ancient hunger. I felt the air around me crackle, saturated with dread that felt like a storm brewing just below the surface. The urgency to escape clawed at my insides, yet my legs remained unresponsive, rooted firmly to the floor. "Who are you?" I croaked, the question a mere whisper that barely escaped my trembling lips. The figure shifted, its silhouette blurring at the edges before condensing back into focus. A voice slithered from it, a dry rasp that sliced through the thick tension. Not who, it echoed, but what? Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, the television flickering wildly before dying, leaving me with only the pounding of my heart and the raspy breaths of the ghastly presence before me. Panic rose as I struggled to regain control, breathing in ragged bursts that filled my lungs with cold dread. Then it happened. A cacophony of whispers erupted from the shadows, each voice overlapping the last, clamoring for attention. They called me by name, drawing me into a web of fear, spinning tales of betrayal and loss, haunting memories embodied. I stumbled back, my foot catching the edge of the coffee table, sending a lamp crashing to the ground. In an instant, the darkness swallowed the sound of shattering glass, replacing it with the eerie quiet of a grave. I could hear nothing but the cacophony of my own terrified breaths. The entity moved closer, the weight of its presence like a physical force pushing against my chest. The outline shifted, transforming from a vague figure into something grotesque and twisted, yet indistinct like a reflection in a murky pool. "Your sins draw me," it hissed, each word laden with an intoxicating dread that coiled tightly around my throat. "You cannot escape what you were. Where had I gone wrong?" I couldn't remember. A memory tugged at me, barely formed, slipping through my fingers like sand. Was this punishment? Had I awakened something that should have remained undisturbed? The sensation of waking nightmares blurred the line of reality as I fought the urge to collapse under the weight of everything that was happening. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room, and the figure was gone. I gasped, trembling hands gripping the edge of the table. The whispering had quieted, and I thought, perhaps, I was alone. As I stood there, blinking at the empty space before me, a thought gnawed at me. The show I had been watching, the hunt for lost souls, the ghosts waiting to share their stories, was now my reality. I turned to the television, which flickered back to life unbidden, the main character now trapped in a scene that mirrored my own horror, a darkened corridor with disembodied whispers weaving through the shadows. My breath seized as I realized he was staring directly at me, his eyes wide with terror, pointing towards something beyond the screen. "Behind you," he shouted, and it wasn't just the dialogue. It was a plea, a prophecy, a premonition. I wanted to scream, to run, but the frantic rush of adrenaline turned to ice. I spun around slowly, dread pooling in my stomach, and there it was again, the figure, more defined this time, arms outstretched, its grin stretching wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth like a predator lurking in the dark. And just as its fingers grazed the edge of my shoulder, the screen behind me burst into an unimaginable light, pulling me into the chaos of colors and voices. In that moment, I felt a scream escape my lips, but it was drowned out by the rising crescendo of laughter, a sound that echoed not just in the room, but from the very depths of my soul. In that instant, I realized the truth. I had become part of the tale, forever trapped in a cycle of horror that would never end. My heart raced, my mind swirling, and just as everything turned to black, a final whisper curled around my ear, "Welcome to your nightmare," and then silence. The silence that followed was an oppressive weight, pressing down on my chest like a leaden blanket. I opened my eyes to darkness once again, but this time it felt different. This wasn't just a lack of light. It was as if the darkness itself was breathing, expanding and contracting around me, alive and sentient. I strained to listen, willing the last echoes of laughter to fade, but they hung in the air, a sinister reminder of what I had witnessed. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for its glow to pierce the dark. My fingers trembled, swiping and tapping, but nothing worked. The sudden realization that I was completely alone, not just in the room, but in some uncharted realm, struck me like a cold fist. The walls felt alive, pulsating with each breath I took, closing in around me in a serpentine embrace. And then I heard it, the faintest scratch of nails against wood, a slow, deliberate drag that sent a chill racing up my spine. I blinked, adjusting to the utter void. The shadows shifted, revealing indistinct shapes weaved together a thick tapestry of lost souls, their hollow eyes gazing back at me. Were they alive? No, their mouths moved, soundless cries frozen in terror, shimmering against the shadows. "Help us!" They seemed to plead, but their voices were only whispers of my mind, suffocated by my own rising dread. I stumbled back, my foot catching on something unseen, and I fell with a thud against the cold floor. But before I could scramble to my feet, something greater than gravity yanked me back, pulling my body across the floor. I froze, the air thick and suffocating with the scent of damp earth and rot, as cold finger snow, more like tendril coiled around my ankle, holding me down with a vice-like grip. No. The scream tore its way out of me, raw and primal, but it echoed as though someone had swallowed it, leaving only the sound of despair. I pulled at the floor, clawed at the polished wood, but the grip only tightened, as if the floorboards themselves were conspiring against me. My heart pounded like a war drum, every beat urging me to escape, but the shadows began to solidify, taking shape as figures emerged from the dark corners of my vision. They bore the same expressions of anguish as the souls, who had reached out moments before, their forms shifting and melding. Their tormented faces twisted, mouths gaping at impossible angles, as if trying to scream without sound. I screamed again, an instinctual plea for release. "Please, let me go!" The tendrils shifted, dragging me toward the cluster of souls now morphing into something horrific. They whispered my name, a name I could barely recognize anymore, as they clawed toward me from the abyss, their translucent hands reaching, yearning for something they had long lost. The agony in their hollow eyes threatened to consume me, drawing me into their eternal horror. And then there was a shift, a sudden surge of energy that enveloped me, and a voice resonated within my skull. "You can join us," it hissed, the promise both inviting and terrifying. "Relinquish your past, and become part of this family." My breath quickened, a storm of emotion surging through, fear, confusion, rage. These were souls that had suffered, taken, trapped, just like me. I hesitated, instinctively itched to fight, to resist whatever devouring darkness awaited me. But a flicker of compromise flashed in my mind, a way to escape the unbearable weight pressing me into the floor. Suddenly, a powerful jolt shot through me, breaking the binding hold. I rolled over just in time to see a figure emerge from the shadows, a woman with cascading hair and a face etched with sorrow. She extended her trembling hand toward me, her own fingers shaking. "It's not too late. You mustn't stay." But just then, the ground quaked beneath us, ripping through the layers of shadow, tearing them apart like a fraying tapestry. The faces of the damned twisted in horrific unison, their voices melding into a banshee-like wail. "Stay!" As the darkness writhed and clawed to pull me back, I lunged towards her, her outstretched hand flickering like a candle in a storm. The room erupted in chaos as the figures screamed and surged with fury, the shadows enveloping everything. I reached for her, desperate, heart pounding, on the verge of grasping a way out. Just as our fingers were about to brush, the entire scene imploded into blinding light. In an instant, I was hurled backward, spinning into the chaos as screams and laughter echoed with savage delight. With a deafening roar, the darkness consumed everything, and I was left suspended in nothingness. The last thing I heard before oblivion claiming me was that voice, chilling and laden with malice. "Welcome to our family forever." And then I fell. The air was heavy, thick with the remnants of fear as I plummeted through an inky void, engulfed by a silence so profound it buzzed in my ears. Instinctively, I clawed at the endless darkness around me, my fingers grasping for something, anything to hold onto. But the void was unyielding, a vast chasm devoid of comfort or even hope, and I plunged deeper into its depths. Finally, with a violent shudder, I landed not on a surface, but instead on soft earth, moist and cool under my body. I rolled onto my back, panting, as the remnants of heat and horror ebbed from my chest. Shards of remembered screams echoed in my mind as I blinked against the dim light that enveloped me. I was no longer alone. A cluster of faint glowing orbs flickered around, floating just above the damp ground. They pulsed gently, like distant stars beckoning me to their embrace, but dread twisted in my gut. I knew how I knew that beauty often masked ugliness in this forsaken realm. As I rose to my feet, a bitter scent invaded my senses, a nauseating miasma of decay and despair. Each breath reminded me of the still echoing laughter from earlier, a haunting soundtrack playing just beyond my understanding. My heart clenched. In this place, laughter could twist into something horrifying with only a fleeting moment's notice. I stumbled forward, the ground beneath me not just soil, but a tapestry of whispers and memories, a graveyard of forgotten souls. As the eerie glow illuminated my surroundings, I noticed shadowy figures emerging at the edges of my vision, faint silhouettes weaving in and out of focus. They began to shuffle closer, their forms twitching as if struggling against an unseen force. "Help us," they rasped in a chorus of pain, eyes hollow and pleading, yet that stubborn spark of life flickered just behind the veil of their despair. I took a step back, shaken, my instincts screaming that this was another trap designed to ensnare my soul. "Your past is a burden," a voice crooned softly from the gathering shadows. "Join us, and you shall be free, a part of what you truly are." The voice was silky, seductive, coiling around me like a snake, enticing yet menacing. "No!" I gasped, heart pounding against my ribs. "I won't be like you." But the figures still advanced, the air around them shimmering with a fervor that drew me in unwittingly. They stretched their hands toward me, still and begging, and the whispering grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. I tried to run, but the ground quivered beneath my feet, anchoring me in place. "Stay with us. Forget the pain, forget the loss," they urged in shameful unison, their voices rippling through my core. I closed my eyes tightly, shaking my head as the shadows encircled me. With a desperate cry, I forced my eyes open, an instinctual surge of defiance igniting within me. I was ready to fight against the darkness threatening to engulf my very essence, when another presence stepped forth from the murky edges, revealing the woman I had glimpsed before, the one whose spirit flickered like a candle in the storm. "Don't listen to them," she cried, voice resonating with fierce urgency. "You must find the light. The truth lies beyond their grasp." She extended her hand once more, her eyes wide with determination, the only source of warmth in the cold dread that surrounded us. But the shadows recoiled, their expressions morphing into fury. The once pleading whispers escalated into a cacophony of tortured shrieks, engulfing the fragile light she emitted. "Foolish child," they screamed, "the family will always take its own." I felt shadows close in tighter, the vibrancy of their anger crackling in the air like electricity. They slammed into me, fracturing my defenses, a whirlwind of faces and anguished cries. Just as I staggered, horrified, the woman's grasp was torn away, her figure fading beneath an explosive surge of dark energy that radiated outwards. "No!" I screamed, lunging toward her, but tinted whispers coiled around my ankle, dragging me down, plunging me into despair once more. The cold tendrils wrapped tighter, gripping my heart with fear. "Stay," they taunted. "You belong with us now forever." As waves of darkness crashed over me, my thoughts splintered into chaos. Was this the end of my fight? But then amidst the blanket of shadows I caught a glimpse of something glimmering, a break in the oppressive night. A portal, perhaps? My heart raced as I lunged toward it, desperation fueling my escape. The last thing I saw was the woman's face twisting in agony, a haunting echo of my own fate reflected within her eyes. Just as I stepped into the light, I felt hand-cold, clammy-close around my throat, yanking me back, a multitude of voices merging into one final demand. Stay, stay, STYs. I was yanked back into the darkness. I glimpsed the horrors awaiting me beyond the light, knowing they would consume whatever spark of hope I had left. In that moment of helplessness, the distorted voice echoed within the void. Now you'll truly see what family means. And then, everything went dark again. The silence returned, but this time it was suffocating, wrapping around me like a shroud. A shiver coursed through my veins as I lay motionless on the damp ground, the weight of the shadows pressing down, clinging to every fiber of my being. I felt something slither past me, an intangible, cold sensation that made every hair stand on end. There was something so profoundly disturbing about being at the mercy of the unseen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were growing more restless. I blinked, heart hammering wildly in my chest as the soft glow of the orbs flickered back to life. They hovered like lost souls lamenting their fate, illuminating twisted trees that loomed grotesquely above me. The branches twisted into hideous shapes, reminiscent of clawed hands reaching for a silvery moon that hung low. But the moon was not a beacon, no, it was a gaping eye, watching through its luminous veil. "Where are you?" I called weakly, my voice trembling. The shadows thickened, and for a fraction of a second, I alone held the flicker of light until it flickered and dulled, revealing a nightmarish expanse around me. "Find her," a voice hissed, slithering through the dimness, no longer soft but sharp, like glass cutting through flesh. "She waits, always waits." My skin prickled as realization settled in. Was the woman still here? Would she come back to rescue me, or was she yet another victim of this wretched place? Panic surged as unmistakable forms began to emerge from the trees, tall, imposing figures swathed in shadow, cloaked in blackness deeper than the abyss. Their faces, twisted and faceless, drifted in and out of coherence, seething with malice as they glared at me with eyes forged of the very darkness around us. A guttural growl erupted from the nearest creature, vibrating through the ground like an earthquake, the sound reverberating in my bones. I recoiled, instinctively backing away, but the ground rose against me, thick as mud, anchoring me in place. "Where is she?" I urged, desperation clawing at my throat. "You want me, what will you do with her?" They lunged forward, and I could sense the potent hunger in their bare reaches, a keening desire to consume my very essence. I propelled myself backward, heart racing. "Stay away from me," I cried, frantically looking for a way out, but the forest was alive, closing in as if it was an entity conspiring against my escape. The figures halted abruptly, and an overwhelming darkness spilled forth from the depths of the trees. It rippled and expanded, revealing the shimmering form of the woman once again, adorned like an ethereal phantom surrounded by fear, her face awash with grief and fury. "Stop!" she screamed, and as the shadows hesitated at her command, my breath caught in my throat. But the darkness reacted, twisting into angry shapes that lunged toward her, forcing her further back into the void. "Your light cannot pierce this darkness," they howled in furious unison. "You think she can save you?" I felt my heart break as they surged toward her, and in the agony of that moment, her eyes met my fiery and pleading, yet somehow full of despair. "You must leave. You must break the cycle," she shouted. "The truth is not what you think it is." Suddenly, the shadows lunged at me, diving into my mind, their voices invading my thoughts with cruel insistence. "You'll understand soon enough," they whispered. "Family is forever." The darkness swirled ominously around her, like a tempest threatening to consume everything in its path. Just as I reached for the woman, a searing pain exploded in my chest, a grip of ice that crushed my heart like an iron vice. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground, spiraling as blinding light ripped through my eyelids. "Know this," a voice bellowed, raw and powerful, reverberating through my marrow. "Not all bonds are salvation, some are curses forged in blood." The pain escalated, igniting every nerve ending, while the shadows stretched over me, suffocating and relentless. In a fleeting moment of clarity, I turned my gaze towards the woman as she raised her hand in a final act of defiance. "Remember who you are?" she cried, her voice piercing through the shadowy whispers, breaking through my haze, and just like that, she was gone, snatched into the depths by a ravenous maw of darkness, swallowed whole, leaving an echo of her sorrow hanging in the air, a harbinger of what was to come. As I lay crumpled on the ground, gasping, I felt a sinister, unnatural presence looming closer. My mind fragmented. I could hear the soft sigh of resignation from the shadows and the Arbia collective gasp, followed by a chorus of maniacal laughter that sent shivers racing down my spine. "Welcome home," they echoed, their contempt filling the void of my despair. And then I saw Ida flickering light, a rift in the darkness, beckoning me towards something far worse. "Embrace the family," they cajoled, and as I was drawn closer to it, I felt the boundaries of my reality begin to disintegrate. What awaited me beyond that light was an unfathomable dread that clawed at the edges of my sanity, and the last thing I heard before everything went black again was the sound of my own scream melding into their sinister symphony. The void enveloped me like a frigid mist, pulling me deeper into a spiraling abyss where time ceased to exist. The last notes of my scream echoed in the darkness, fading slowly, until there was only silencia, silence punctuated by the faintest whispers. Guttural sounds intertwined with muted cries danced around me, evoking a dreadful past that clung to the air like smoke. Then, the light returned, not the anomalous rift of hope from before, but a blinding luminescence that clawed at my eyelids, demanding to be let in. With a forceful inhale, I opened my eyes to a warped reality that shimmered like a mirage. The once menacing forest morphed into a familiar landscape dotted by vague recollections. I stood there, at the threshold of a childhood home, its shutters painted a once vibrant blue, now faded and peeling. The air smelled like nostalgia, mingling sorrow with childhood laughter, but an undercurrent of dread turned my stomach. Go inside, a whisper sighed through the leaves, darkly seductive. It echoed over and over, urging me toward the door that loomed like a portal into another world. With trembling fingers, I reached out and pushed the door open, its creak resonating like a mournful lament. Inside, time stood still. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light streaming through the grimy windows, casting a sepulchral glow over the room. Family photos blanketed the walls, faces of my past staring back at me with distant eyes, their smiles twisted and mocking, as if they held secrets too heavy to bear. In the center of the room, there stood the old dining table, set as if expecting guests who would never arrive. A rancid odor crept through the air, and I realized it had been years since anyone had sat there to share a meal. As I stepped deeper into the home, shadows began to gather in the corners of my vision, creeping and intertwining, shaping themselves into something grotesque that made my skin crawl. The voice returned, insistent, layering upon itself like 1,000 echoes. "They've been waiting just for you." Chilled to the bone, I whirled around, but the shadows retreated, a fitful game of hide and seek. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged, small, familiar, and impossibly wrong. A child stood there, cloaked in swirling mists, her eyes hollow and reflective like a stagnant pool. It was my younger self, but the hunger in her gaze was unnatural. "Why did you leave?" she asked, her voice a haunting whisper that clawed at my heart. "You promised we would never part. Don't come near me," I shouted, backing away as icy tendrils wove around my ankles. The girl stepped closer, body shifting like smoke, her mouth curling into an insidious smile. "Now it's your turn to stay," she said, the echo of her voice slipping into multiple layers, growing louder and more insistent. "You can't escape what you are." The walls began to close in on me, and a disembodied laughter erupted, ricocheting off the corners of my fractured mind. Panic clawed at my throat as I darted towards the door, but it slammed shut, binding me within this terrorscape. I press my palms against the surface, feeling a pulsating energy behind the wood, a dark heartbeat urging me to stay, unwinding my very soul. Suddenly, I felt Ida touch across my back like ice, trailing down my spine with predatory slowness. My breath hitched as I turned, facing an amorphous mass of shadow looming behind me, its amorphous features shifting and swirling into the forms of my lost family members' twisted visages of grief and despair. Their eyes bore into mine, a poignant mix of longing and anger. "Join us, dear one," they cooed, their voices an intoxicating melody that beckoned me closer. "We've waited so long for our reunion." The shadows swelled, reaching for me with grasping hands that promised warmth, but dripped with malevolence. Heart racing, I screamed again, but no sound emerged. The silence enveloped me, thick and impenetrable. In a moment of wild desperation, I lunged towards the window, seeking even a hint of escape, but the shadows surged forward, congealing into an impenetrable wall. My last glimpse of the outside world was the moon, the gaping eye, now a ghostly witness to my impending doom. "Remember your promise," the shadow child shrieked, her laughter a chilling caress against my ear, swallowing all hope. Just as I felt the darkness dragging me down into the depths of despair, everything went blank, a shroud of night swallowing my last flicker of consciousness. But then, as if a veil had been lifted, a crack of reality opened. I gasped awake in the forest, the orbs of light shimmering around me once more. The shadows still loomed, whispering sinister secrets. I looked around, breathless, and then there was a fleeting glimpse out of the corner of my Imy childhood home stood just beyond the trees, the door left ajar, welcoming me back with a sinister invitation. And from within, they called to me in a haunting harmony, "You belong here. Always." The moment I stepped forward, the ground beneath me felt alive, pulsing with a rhythmic thrum that echoed the beating of my heart. The familiar warmth of nostalgia melded with an insidious chill that seeped into my bones. The air thickened with foreboding as I neared the edge of the woods, that accursed path leading me back not just to my childhood home, but to a darkness I had long ago tried to bury. Slivers of moonlight illuminated the warped facade of the house, revealing cracks that spiderwebbed across the walls, like the skeletal fingers of the past reaching back to claim me. I hesitated. The whispers picked up in fervor, clawing at my sanity with a seductive familiarity. "Come home," they beckoned, echoing all the joy I had once known and all the pain I feared to relive. With a shaky breath, I pushed the door open, its haunting creak slicing through the stillness. The oppressive air inside held a chill that felt like fingers grazing my neck, ghostly caresses born from memories I wished to forget. Shadows leapt to life, spiraling and writhing as if eager to tell their stories. Together at last, echoed the voice of my child self, a cacophony of titters spiraling into the room like shards of glass. "You can feel them, can't you? They've missed you," gulping down the fear, I tried to ground myself. "It's just my mind," I whispered to myself. "None of this is real." Yet, the photographs on the walls twisted and morphed with each blink, the grinning faces of my family now twisted into expressions of malice and grief. "Why didn't you save us?" A voice emerged from the depths, a rasping chime that shuddered through the air, resonating with a grief I knew too well. "You left us behind." I turned sharply, searching for the source, but the shadows twisted, revealing glimpses of my family lost in agony yet still rooted in the fabric of this wretched place. Suddenly, the living room fell into an oppressive silence, the air altering, becoming charged and heavy. I took a step back, and in that space, with the shadows flickering, I saw her, the little girl, my younger self, radiant and horrendous, standing beside a worn rocking chair that creaked as if in rhythm to an old lullaby. "Do you remember the games we used to play?" she sang, her voice a ghostly echo, entrancing and horrifying all at once. "The game of hide and seek, we can play that again." She beckoned to me, motioning with a tiny hand, as her smile twisted into something more sinister, filled with teeth that glinted in the low light. The room around me melted. The walls seemed to breathe as they folded into one another. An expansion of space enveloped me, creating a warped distortion as the air became alive with sorrow. And then the atmosphere thickened ominously. A murmur started deep within the wood, shredding through the silence. The whispers crescendoed into desperate wails, calling me to join the forgotten. "No, stop!" I cried, covering my ears with trembling hands. A sudden crash startled me as the rocking chair toppled over, revealing a hidden door behind it. A blackened passageway gaped like a predator's maw, inviting and treacherous. The little girl tilting her head back, extending her arms. Shadows surged to enfold her, cloaking her visage in darkness. It's time to find them. The unearthly dread released its grip long enough for curiosity to take hold. I stumbled forward toward the door that seemed to beckon with promises I couldn't comprehend. Steeling myself, I grasped the handle, a sensation of cold radiating up my arm as the cries intensified, echoing from beyond the threshold. "Don't go," my childish voice pleaded, as the room darkened further. The shadows thickened, swirling with rage, spiraling into a vortex, their frenzied whispers growing, crescendoing into a chilling chant. "Stay with us forever." Just as my heart threatened to break under the weight of the shadows, the door to the passage swung ajar with a grotesque groan, revealing a space devoid of light. Without a second thought, I stepped through the threshold, falling into darkness so profound it swallowed my scream, my fear, leaving only the shivering promise of reunion. Yet, as the door slammed shut behind me, my breath clawed in my throat. I found myself not in darkness, but in a sepulchral glow illuminating a hallowed room filled with intricately carved wooden coffins standing at odd angles, like sentinels waiting for someone to awaken them. A cold sweat dripped down my back as I noticed one coffin slowly creaking open at the far end, a figure stirring within, a low whisper slipping through the cracks, "Welcome home." And there, amidst the auras of longing and despair, I realized this was only the beginning. The air was saturated with the scent of decay, an acrid nix that clung to my nostrils and churned my stomach as I stood frozen, caught between flight and fascination. The light illuminating the room flickered unsteadily, like the last gasp of a candle in its final throes. The coffin at the far end exhaled soft sighs, a rhythm that began to synchronize with the frantic thump of my own heart. "Welcome home," the whisper coiled around me, chilling and seductive. Curiosity dug its claws into my chest, compelling me forward against the tide of instinct that screamed for escape. With each step toward the coffin, the wooden floor beneath me groaned, as if warning of the immensity of what lay ahead. As I neared, a figure emerged from the shadows inside the coffin, pale and gaunt, its features indistinct beneath a veil of grime and sorrow. It lifted its head, and for a moment, I was transfixed by the hollow shadows of its eyes, like two dark pools drawn from an abyss. "You were always meant to be here," it rasped, voice straining under the weight of despair. In that moment, a flicker of recognition sparked within me as the figure emerged entirely from the confines of the coffin, worn, but somehow eerily familiar. My mind raced, caught between disbelief and revelation. "Who are you?" I choked out, though a part of me feared the answer. "Your reflection," it spoke, the words laced with sorrow. "We share more than blood. There's a darkness we inherited, child. An eternity of secrets buried beneath the soil of this house." Behind me, shadows stirred restlessly. I turned to glance back at the passageway, but my feet were planted firmly in place, as if the floor had grown roots that intertwined with my bones. The air thickened, pulsing with a confluence of regret and longing as the other coffins stirred, groaning awake like ancient tablets revealing forbidden truths. The dim light flickered again, and from each coffin, specters began to stand, draped in sorrowful nostalgia, their whispers melding into a mournful requiem. "Join us," they intoned, their voices layered atop one another, echoing like a chorus of tormented souls reaching out from the edge of nowhere. It's time to embrace what you've denied. A flood of memories cascaded through my mind, fragments of laughter, moments of tears, fleeting glimpses of happier days now twisted into grotesque parodies amid their lament. "No!" I cried, shaking my head violently. "I don't belong here. I can't." But the darkness swooped upon me, wrapping around my throat, squeezing tighter until my breath came in ragged gasps. The specters advanced, and in that suffocating moment, time seemed to fracture and splinter. Images overlapped me: childhood, my family, the love indelibly tainted by the shadows of abandonment. "Leave us," I begged the specter before me, though the desperation in my voice rang hollow even to my own ears. "I've tried to forget. It will never let you go. Can you not see?" The specter's face twisted, revealing eyes swirling with centuries of grief. "There is no escape. You are bound by the blood that runs through your veins. The price of ignorance is to bear the weight of dreams that haunt our nights." As the truth pierced me, a resounding crack echoed through the silent room, and I turned to see the walls behind the coffins begin to seep with darkness, thickening like ink pouring from a shattered vessel. The malevolent pulse of the house grew stronger, thrumming in a discordant rhythm that sent terror racing up my spine. Suddenly, one of the coffins burst open with a shattering force, tossing splinters through the air as another figure emerged, cloaked in shadows, its mouth widening into a grim smile that revealed rows of sharp teeth. "Dearest little sister," it hissed mockingly, revealing a twitching, skeletal hand. "Time to play." Before I could react, the room expanded, an infinite expanse of coffins materializing in the darkness, each host awakening with silent screams that wrapped around me like chains. I stumbled back, desperate to escape. The figures lurched forward, a rush of wailing faces blurring into one grotesque entity, hunting me down. "Play with us!" they screeched in unison, the sound fracturing my mind. And then, just as I turned to flee through the darkness, I heard the unmistakable sound of a child giggling. Me childish voice lifted above the chaos, beckoning from within the spectral embrace. Your turn to hide. The confines around me twisted, sealing shut as I was drawn deeper into the convergence of nightmares. The gaping maw of the coffin loomed before me in a silent offer. And as the shadows began to swallow me whole, I realized this was no mere game. This was a reckoning, a dreadful unveiling of the past, where darkness awaited like an old friend, ready to claim me once and for all. The darkness enveloped me, thick and suffocating, as I was yanked toward the open coffin. The air crackled with a frigid chill that snaked its way under my skin, igniting panic deep within my core. The mocking giggle echoed again, a sinister mimicry that seemed to drip from the very walls around me. Each wretched face in the throng of specters twisted into gleeful anticipation, their hollow eyes glowing with a ghastly hunger. "Hide and seek." The voice of my childhood echoed, innocent yet tainted with a discordant twist that sent ice through my veins. "You never liked it when I hid, did you?" The floor bucked beneath me, tilting as if the house itself were laughing at my terror. I stumbled toward the coffin, its darkness promising safety, an unsettling redemption. Yet the closer I got, the more I understood that it was not a refuge but a trap, the maw of something far more insidious waiting to consume all that I was, and all that I had ever known. No. I refuse. I screamed, parents' faces flashing before my mind, kind eyes shaped by love and edged with shadows of neglect. I darted left, barely dodging a skeletal figure reaching for my throat, their fingers somehow embodying both the warmth of family and the chill of death. "Do you remember when we played in the fields?" The whisper was soft, yet it tore like barbed wire through my memories. A vision of sunlight poured in, laughter ringing through the air, but then it shifted bitterly to the sight of a worn house of bricks, chipping paint, and echoes of promises shattered by silent arguments. I could almost hear my own voice, trembling with fear, whispering, "Don't let them find you." I darted into the rows of coffins, the shadows closing in, Each step echoed like thunder, and I could feel the air thickening, the very fabric of reality twisting around me as desperate fingers caressed my arms, urging me back toward the waiting darkness. It was as if the house hungered for my despair, thriving on the frayed edges of my sanity. Desperation clawed at my throat as I turned to flee deeper into the maze of regrets and nightmares. I could still hear them behind me, the soft whispers threading through the chaos, weaving a tapestry of my life, every misdeed magnified in the eyes of those I had lost and abandoned. "Come play," they sang, the voices blending into a haunting lullaby that twined around my thoughts. "Get away from me," I screamed, throwing my hands against the nearest coffin. The impact sent a pulse of pain through my palms, a visceral reminder of the solid world I once knew. As if responding to my distress, the lid shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse of the hollow void, incipient invitation from a realm I couldn't begin to comprehend. Suddenly, the room shifted as a piercing scream broke through the air, shattering the momentary stillness, cascading through the walls like a spectral alarm. I whipped around, searching for the source, heart racing as raw terror unfurled in the pit of my stomach. It was a sound so familiar, so achingly pain-like, a mother calling out for her lost child. And then I saw Hermie Mother, torn and wild, her anguished eyes darting between the coffins, bony fingers reaching for me through the darkened air. My heart clenched at the sight of her ravaged form, powerless against the wails of the specters. "Help me! They're coming!" she cried, her voice choked with despair, the shadows swirling hungrily around her. "Mom?" It slipped from my lips in a breathless whisper, shock and disbelief wrestling for dominance. "What happened to you? Run!" Her eyes widened as a shadow shifted near her, a horrible, grinning face emerging from the darkness. It was the next specter, its grin impossibly wide, its body radiating the aura of loss and regret. "You can't save everyone," it said, a cruel delight twinkling in its eyes. "But you can join us." Without thought, I lunged toward her, but the world splintered as the shadows converged, swallowing her scream in an avalanche of despair. "No!" I screamed, my heart shattering as she vanished into the ravenous dark. "Your turn to hide," echoed my voice, an anguished mockery of innocence that clung to the air like a noxious fog, leaving me gasping for breath. With the cacophony of despair ringing in my ears, I plunged into the unknown, desperate to evade the web of shadows tightening around me. But deep within the coffin's unholy darkness, an unfeeling whisper awaited, ready to unveil the final secret that would seal my fate. "We've been waiting for your return." At that moment, the atmosphere twisted, collapsing inward, shrouding me in a blinding veil of darkness as a new presence began to awaken, something ancient, something powerful. The shadows roared in acceptance, and the dread swelled as I realized chaotic laughter would soon engulf me entirely, heralding the beginning of my own nightmare. The air crackled with anticipation as I stumbled further into the suffocating darkness, and that chilling song of memories and haunt surged anew, echoing through the hollow structure. I was caught in their grasp, lost, terrified, yearning for escape, but tethered to the anguish that felt so familiar. My heart raced as the specters loomed around me, their hollow eyes drinking in my fear, the twisted faces writhing with anticipation as they called out for me to remember, to embrace what I had once sought to forget. "Welcome back, dear child," echoed the tortured voices, a cacophony that gnawed at my sanity, drowning me in an all-consuming despair. The floor beneath me trembled, reverberating with the cries of the lost and returning, their wails weaving a poignant tapestry of isolation and longing. With every thump of my heart, I felt them urging me closer to the truth I had fled for so long. Then the light flickered. A sliver of luminescence pierced through the void, revealing the unmistakable figure of my mother's shadow, hovering just beyond my reach. She held out her hand, a beacon that beckoned me forward. "You must come," she cried, voice laced with a desperate urgency that pulled at my soul. "Remember our promise, the bond that connects us." Mom! I screamed, the word feeling so heavy, so laden with years of silence and unspoken words. You're here. But then the shadows surged, and the twisted visage of my childhood self reappeared, her laughter ringing out with the clarity of a siren's call. You can't save her, she taunted, her giggles echoing, mingling with the cries. Not unless you let go of your past. The wall shifted, pulsing around me like living flesh, feeding off the chaos I exuded. Shadows wove tighter, clasping my limbs in an iron grip. My heart thudded in frantic rhythm as the truth began to unfurl in front of me, that sweet voice, a ghostly whisper that curled around my mind, leading me further down the rabbit hole. Join us, more voices hissed, embrace the cycle. I could feel the shadows closing in around me, and yet the light of my mother flickered defiantly, a last bastion of hope glimmering against the encroaching dark. You must choose, she urged. There's still time. You can break the cycle before it fully binds you. But the laughter grew louder, a symphony of sorrow that echoed the very soul of this house, of voices of all the family members I had lost, their shadows mixing, their forms fluid as they tugged at my heartstrings. Stay with us, always, they sang in unison, beckoning with invisible chains. No. I roared, pulling against the grip of the darkness, the release of my past echoing through every fiber of my being, tearing at the veil that clung so tightly around my throat. The shadows shrieked with rage, their visions blurring together, clawing for dominance as I fought, heart racing. Suddenly, it struck me, the very thing that gripped me wasn't just fear or despair. It was the legacy of my family, the sins that were buried deep, whispered down through generations, the burden of their unfulfilled pains. You're not my family, I shouted, my voice rending through the air like steel against iron. I won't let you use me. And then, with a surge of will, I broke through the encroaching tendrils, stumbling toward the light that was my mother. Mom! I gasped, reaching out, ready to grasp her hand. Yet, as I surged closer, the visage of the child warped, twisting into something horrific with a grin like a raw gash. You'll stay, it shrieked. You're mine. Forever. Everything shattered me. Mother dissolved into a blinding flash, and in an instant, darkness swallowed the room whole. I felt my body crumbling, my thoughts splintering as I dropped into an abyss, a scream clawing at my throat, a chilling rebuke to the false visage of family that haunted me. When I finally found myself back in that coffin's embrace, the shadows surged anew, this time sinking deeper inside me. I was anchored in place. The resonance of their laughter thrummed at my core, while my own soul wailed in rebellion. I was not lost, but neither was I free. Family doesn't let you forget. It folds around you, their voices danced. The cycle continues. And as they closed in on me, darkness embracing all I had ever feared, I gasped, literally gasped, realizing the final twist that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. I was bound to these wretched souls. Their darkness was entwined with mine, and in that moment of despair, I understood the unbearable truth. I would remain here, a part of them, waiting to lure in another unwitting soul, forever played in this grave charade of shadows and echoes. And just before the dark closed its unyielding grip, their whispers curled sweetly around my ear, "Welcome home forever." The last thing I heard before being engulfed entirely was the echoing giggles of my younger self, singing a haunting refrain, "Your turn to hide."